currently my role at PDI DreamWorks is as an animator. But in the past, I've also done animation on non-animated films like visual effects movies like Lord of the Rings. I was also a character technical director on Lord of the Rings and did a lot of technical work in terms of writing the pipeline for animation and helping define how animation worked with the other departments. In the industry, I guess my role is more, I see myself more as an animator than as a character rigger, but most people know me from my character rigging tools and stuff that I've written, like all the fast animation rigging DVDs and the integrating a creature rig DVDs that I've done before. And I went over as a character TD, which means that I was in charge of just sort of setting up rigging and stuff like that for the Lord of the Rings. But I always wanted to be an animator. That was my dream since I was a child, was to animate. So while I would set up rigs, I would also animate on the side. And then luckily the animation director saw one of my animations and said, "Hey, do you want to try animating?" And I said, "Yeah." And he let me animate a little bit on film 1. Film 2, I animated quite a bit more. I moved over to the animation department full-time, worked a lot on Gollum. And then film 3, my role was as an animation lead, which meant that I went to all the meetings with Peter and Richard and all the people who were in charge, and went to all the daily sessions and was kind of in charge of just making sure that everything was working okay from the technical side of what the animators needed, as well as answering any questions if any of the other leads weren't available. And in terms of the highlights for what I'm doing now, I'm just learning so much about animation and acting from so many incredibly talented animators at work. I can literally turn around and ask people who've been doing it for 20 years what they think about what I've done and ask for advice. And that's a huge boon. One of the things that inspires me most is just watching other people interact. I love seeing people who don't know they're being watched doing things like in a general day-to-day basis. Like if you go to a restaurant and you sit down and you watch two people having a conversation who are on their first date, and you see their body language and the way they hold themselves and what, you know, how they tilt their heads and things like that, and just stuff that's totally natural. Someone had asked me once what movies I watch to get reference from for animation, and I don't like to watch movies because, I mean, I love to watch movies, but I don't like to watch movies for animation reference because the actors know that they're on camera, and they know how to hold themselves best for the shot that they're, you know, they know this is my best side, you know, or whatever. People in the real world don't know that, and they'll do things that aren't their best likeness. You know, they do stuff that isn't going to look good on camera, but it looks interesting and it's fun. And you know, I love watching like little kids run and the way they just sort of throw themselves into it and they bah, 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 bah. That kind of stuff inspires me. Any real world going out and actually seeing people doing things, that totally inspires me. I'm afraid that it's getting more and more technical in terms of there's all this technology coming out, and it seems like people are forgetting about the art of it that's so important. For example, all the motion capture technology and things like that. I think those are great helps, but I think that they kind of take away from the art of actually acting. And you see things like movies like Waking Life, or I haven't seen the latest one that he just did, Scanner Darkly. You have reviewers looking at those, and they go, say, who needs animation? You've got actors, and you can trace it. And it's like, no, that's not the point. What he's done is it's a really cool look, but it doesn't take anything away from animation. And people seem to think it's kind of one or the other. And I would really like to see just more aesthetically pleasing, more deep animation coming out, and just more openness to understanding it as an art and allowing it to be the art form that it is. Yeah, we used mocap on Lord of the Rings quite a bit, and mocap definitely has its place. I mean, it's great at getting a lot of information really quickly, and it's great if you have a really good motion capture performer. It's just the same thing as having an actor versus like an extra. If you have an actor on camera and you say, can you do this, and you give them the emotional beats that they're trying to hit, they can hit it and they can do a great job. If you have an extra who's not as classically trained or not as trained as an actor, they may not do as good of a job. With motion capture, it tended to be for a long time that you didn't need, you weren't getting somebody who was a trained actor. You were getting somebody who could move, or someone who looked good in spandex or whatever, you know. Someone who's a dancer would be performing, not somebody who's necessarily an actor. And I think that's changing a bit. And so on Lord of the Rings, we had Andy Serkis being Gollum, and he was motion captured a lot. But even so, a lot of what he did had to be touched up in animation, because physically his body was different from Gollum. And sometimes he did things that we had to change because it wasn't what was wanted for the shot, or Peter changed his mind or whatever. So I think that there tends to be this idea, usually from the producer side of things, that mocap saves you money, it's quicker, it's easier, it gets you what's really there, but it doesn't unless you are really, really good and you have a good actor and you've got a good mocap team behind you, because a good mocap team can definitely make all the difference in terms of knowing how to clean up the motion, what to do with it, and stuff like that. But personally, personally, my choice is animation. I just love it. The biggest challenge I had was when I first started in the industry and I was working at Alias Wavefront. I was an intern, and there was another intern at the same time, and the two of us had to share a computer because they didn't have enough computers. And I was a very young, naive guy coming in, and this guy used to treat me like such dirt. He would yell at me all the time, call me names, say my work was crap. He was over the top cruel. I would go home from work literally shaking and almost crying because he just got to me so bad, and there wasn't anything I could do. And whatever I would say was like slam, slam, and he was just emotionally abusive and just cruel. He's like one of those guys where he would meet you and he would immediately see what your buttons were, and he would go, huh, push, 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 and just, and you'd be like, why do you hate me? It took me a while, but I finally learned how to take what he was saying and just let it roll off my back instead of take it on. And it was like it was like a breath of fresh air to finally be able to just go, I don't care. I really don't care what he says. Okay. And that for me was the biggest hurdle to overcome, because it taught me that you're going to run into people like this. There are people in power who treat other people like total dirt. And it taught me that those people don't actually have any power over you. And it gave me a thick skin, which really helps when getting critiques and stuff. Because something that you do when you're in the industry is you get critiqued all the time. You're turning in your work, you're showing it to the directors twice a day. You're taking all of your blood, sweat, and tears and going, here, is this okay? And they go, yeah! Or they go, no. And you're like, okay. And it really taught me how to separate when they say, no, that's not okay, from, it's not a, no, you're not okay. It's a, no, the work isn't okay. You are okay. Not, they're critiquing the work, not critiquing you. And so it helped me kind of develop that skin that you need to have in any kind of creative industry where you've got a client that you're trying to please. So at the time, worst experience of my life. Absolutely horrible. Now, probably one of the best things I ever had to go through, because it's really made the rest of it so much easier. My favorite comic or cartoon character? Wow, what is my favorite comic or cartoon character? Oh yeah, I was X-Men. I loved Superman and Spider-Man and Daredevil and all those. X-Men was huge, especially the Phoenix Saga. That was awesome. When I was young, I read a lot of Garfield comics, and I would trace over them. And Jim Davis was a hero. He must be 400 years old by now. I don't know. I don't like to admit it, but I used to read Archie comics a lot as well, and Betty and Veronica, and of course, because Veronica was hot. I don't know. Actually, the thing I've been enjoying the most is the new Spider-Man comics, the Ultimate Spider-Man, re-going through his old, the whole generation of him, how he became Spider-Man, and it's just basically updated for today's modern age. But I just love the way they're drawn, and the storylines are really great, and so he's probably my favorite Spider-Man.